Hello, and welcome to the 2025 Annual Women-Owned Business Study, a discussion with small business leaders. Today's webcast is presented by Biz2Credit. The program will begin shortly. A recording of today's webcast will be made available in the Biz2Credit Webcast Center following the conclusion of this session. Once again, welcome to the 2025 Annual Women-Owned Business Study, a discussion with small business leaders. Before we begin, please note that this webcast and all answers provided by the participants are meant solely for informational purposes and are not to be considered substitutes for legal or tax advice. Business loans and other federal lending programs are not guaranteed and are issued at the sole discretion of the lender in conjunction with SBA or other governmental agency guidelines as applicable. The views expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the views of Biz2Credit, its affiliates, or partner companies featured in this webcast. Let's start by taking a look at our agenda and introduce our host and guest for this afternoon's presentation. The webcast will last approximately 45 minutes, and we will be looking at insights and findings from our latest annual Women-Owned Business Study. First, we will hear from Corinne Gobble, CEO of the Association of Women's Business Centers. Then, Sarita Ekia, owner of Smack Restaurant in New York City since 2006. And finally, Ginger Siegel, North American lead of small business for MasterCard. Now, I would like to welcome our moderator for today's webinar, Debbie Kemp. Debbie is the Chief People Officer at Biz2Credit and has over 30 years of experience in the financial space. She specializes in creating and delivering people strategies in fast-paced environments, enabling business growth, and driving operational excellence. She is not only the Chief People Officer, but also a business owner of Cork Wine and Spirits in 2 locations. Debbie, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm excited to be hosting this event again for Biz2Credit and talking to women leaders in small business. These women have excelled in their area and are here to analyze the findings of our women-owned business study, as well as tell us about their learnings from their work. First, I'd like to welcome Corinne Gobble, the CEO of the Association of Women Business Centers. Corinne continues to contribute to a variety of initiatives that directly support small businesses in their efforts to grow, to actually get started and grow. She joined the AWBC in 2019, and when the AWBC was confronted with the effects of the global pandemic in early 2020, she and the advocacy team jumped into action. While the Women Business Centers responded tirelessly to the small business concerns in their community, Corinne and the team championed their efforts to secure resources. Corinne, thank you for joining us.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me back again this year.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about your background?
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, I used to be a woman-owned business and worked in my mom's woman-owned, the family business, which was a trucking company. So my experience and sort of my life has lent itself to really just being so passionate and always around this sort of environment. And that's why when I had the opportunity to join as the CEO of the Association of Women's Business Centers, I couldn't wait to have an impact by working with our network of 150 women's business centers now around the country. And I'll just add one thing, for small businesses that are looking to try to find a women's business center, they can go to hope2women.org, and we'll help get them connected.
Great, thanks. As we jump into the women-owned business study, we are seeing a consistent uptick in the average annual revenues, and women continue to outpace men in revenue growth. What do you think's factoring into that growth?
Well, I see women are pushing really hard. They've been coming from the back. You know, when you're the underdog in the room, you're having to work harder to catch up. And we're certainly seeing strong pushes across the network for women who are seeking resources, who are seeking capital. And frankly, we're seeing a trend where people our women, in particular women clients, are really a little more sophisticated in their approaches. They're thinking more about their business as a business and less thinking about it in a way that it just turns into a job for themselves.
Or just following a passion. I mean, they're really into making it a business.
Right. Like this isn't something I'm just going to now be the only employee or the sole proprietor. I'm the doer, I'm the producer. I'm also, filing taxes as a business owner, but thinking about this as a business that's going to be something they hire employees to go about making the production happen, whether it's, a consumer product or a service. And that's what really is making them grow, because now they're expanding that business and not just trying to do everything themselves.
Yep. No, that makes all the sense. In fact, that just kind of follows into our next topic, which is the top 5 industries. They haven't shifted really in ranking, but what we're seeing is that I think last year the other services was more like 18%, and we can see that's gone down a bit. But the other industries have kind of filled that gap in their volume. Do you think that that's an uptick for women businesses? And I guess, the tag onto that is also, if a woman is starting a business, do you think that they should focus on one of these 5 industries?
Ooh, well, let me take the second one first, which is what they should focus on. There are so many different aspects to thinking about what to focus on and how to focus. Like the world is changing so fast. If you just think about technology and AI, cybersecurity, it's important to understand what those trends are and what's moving, so that if you're going to jump in the pool, and it's a cold rush of water when you jump into entrepreneurship, eyes wide open about what's happening in that industry and what value you're going to be able to bring to it. So I think it's more about that than trying to decide like which sector. It's like, how are you going to bring something and be able to add value? And then the second piece that I always tell people, it's kind of more of a business hack and not a macro data point, is if you got to know you have customers. If you don't have customers that are going to buy from you, then you don't need to be going into business there.
Yeah, that's very insightful. I think it is key to think about how you're going to add value, right? As you're starting a business, what's the need and how can you create an answer for that need? And there's a lot of opportunity in the world today.
Yeah. But back to the data trends and what you're seeing across these different sectors, we are seeing women being more confident, spreading their expertise across new sectors. We're seeing more and more women enter into STEM fields, in manufacturing fields, and not just necessarily the traditional service sectors where we've always been.
Really helpful. As our next finding has to do with the acceptance rate, and we've seen the acceptance rate for women increase by 1% compared to last year, and men, on the other hand, has actually decreased, which is also interesting to see, because what we saw last year was more their trajectory. Women were catching up, but they were still also ahead. And so this is a bit of a change this year, that has decreased. And I think complementary to that is that we've also seen that this close to 25% increase in the average funding, which, as I think about it and asking you, that may have something to do with women are more confident. So maybe they're, looking for more and then therefore getting accepted. What do you see?
Confidence is a huge piece of it. We see women, when they come to us and they talk about that they know they need capital, they need to borrow money, they're always talking about what's the minimum they could borrow. And the conversation we get from the men, and we see men clients too, is what's the most they can borrow? Like, what a different perspective. And so that plays a little bit into the gap, but we are seeing that attitude change. Part of that is, I think, the confidence that they're bringing to their business. Another is those technical assistance partners, those counselors and advisors who are working with these women-owned businesses. It's really making a difference. I mean, I can't take full credit for it, but I think it was last year when Biz to Credit added our women's business centers as a referral point, when when clients are applying and they get declined, you all are providing great resources for them to come back and find out why were they declined. So they've got a better chance of succeeding when they do go back.
Yeah, and I also like when you talked about that, the technical assistance. I always felt it was like, who's on your board? Even not an official board, but who are you working with that can give you that advice that you need when you start a business? Because again, as a small business owner, you just don't know everything, right? And we could Google it, but that's not the only place to go. It's to rely on other entrepreneurs that have been there, done that.
Yeah. And Debbie, I call that your bail team. Who's going to bail you out of the problem before you get there? It's your banker, your accountant, your insurance agent, and your lawyer. And by banker, it doesn't have to be where you have your money. It can be a friend, that
Yeah.
you're texting with.
The bail team. I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you again for taking time to meet with us today and discuss these topics. So important.
Look, great numbers. I'm glad to see them. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Now I'd like to introduce Sarita Akia, owner of Restaurant Smack in New York City. On top of that, she has also been on Chopped, the beloved cooking show, and has been interviewed by many food critics and social media influencers like Solomon Dolov, who has over 1.5 million followers across his social channels. So, Sarita, I'd like to see if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Hi, Debbie. I think that I'd love to say that we are going to be approaching our 19th year in business this year. So, getting close to the 20-year mark, which sometimes you blink and go, "How? Oh, wow! How did we get here?" But here we are, and it's been quite the journey.
That's great. We're so happy to have you with us today and talk about this, some of the findings from our study. As you heard with the conversation with Corinne, it'd be good to get your thoughts about the increase that we've seen. And again, if you've seen the same in your business from 2023 to 2024.
Yeah, so I definitely saw an increase 2023 to 2024. It's been pretty consistent. 2025 a little bit early for our data, and it's been a different year for sure the past few months. So I would have to concur. Yeah, what you guys are seeing, we are seeing on the ground.
Great. That's great to hear. Again, as a restaurant owner, restaurants, as again on the industry chart that we discussed earlier, restaurant owners are in the top, are four in the top five. And are you seeing a lot of women-owned businesses in New York City?
I again, because it's been so many years now, it was great to actually think about this because I have seen a lot more, and it's so refreshing. In our neighborhood alone in the East Village, I've seen a lot more pop up. A lot of things open post pandemic, which was that's just such a great sign. And it's been wonderful welcoming them to the neighborhood, just meeting other women-owned businesses and knowing that there's like a network out there that we can tap into.
That's great. So the network, that just rolls right into my next question. Are those, that was great. Are you seeing those communities? And then, are they in those conversations that you had with them, are they seeing this growth as well?
That's a very interesting question because I think what happens is with anyone who owns their own business, and especially I'm going to say, obviously, I had the experience in restaurant, has hospitality, but any kind of retail business that has the hours that a restaurant does, you're so in it. Your head's down, you're in it. You are working a crazy amount of hours. A lot of us have families too, and there's people out there, but there's not these structured organizations or groups that you would think there were, because we're in New York City. There's such a huge population. You would think, oh, there's this group that you could join, that you could meet up with. There's another one. The East Village neighborhood, we've got actually some great resources, but I do find that getting people to carve out time to meet gets very difficult. So I think what we do find is when you have the one-on-one conversations, the more you have them, you realize, oh, we can really help each other out. It just doesn't happen as frequently as it probably should, just because of the scheduling portion of this type of business.
Yeah, I just think it's hard to have an organized discussion, but it's
Yes.
easy to just hop around again to the neighborhood. And I found that in the small businesses that I have, that it's more just catching up with a distributor,
Yes.
of whatever product it is, to see what they're seeing with other businesses like ours, right? And so it's kind of
Yes.
more hearsay, but that becomes your network in a way. So
And
I just
that's
don't know if you've
that's such a
seen
good,
that.
yeah. That's sorry, just so I didn't mean to interrupt you. That's such a good example. Like I've been using the same distributors for 19 years, and I'll get on the phone with them and he'll give me intel, okay, this is what I'm seeing from my other customers. And I'll be like, oh, I was talking to this neighborhood business, and this is so your network is pretty strong and tight. It's just how often you're tapping into it.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
that makes all the sense. Um, you're in the fifth best state for women-owned businesses. Congratulations. That's pretty good, right? It's
We,
awesome.
we gotta get
Um,
we gotta get up there. We gotta get in the top three at least.
yeah, we'll need to move up more. We'll see if we can get more women to do that. Um, how accessible has financing been for you? And again, the other question on that is, whether it's restaurateurs, have they found financing to be easy or different? And I know that just depends on the conversations, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely become easier now. When I think back to even the first almost decade of being in business, so difficult. Just so difficult to get any type of financing. I was very lucky to be introduced to Biz to Credit pretty early on. It was within that first decade of being in business. And I see there's more opportunities for financing. There's more grants going out also, so that's also a nice thing to see. Uh, but you really have to be on top of it. It's you have to dig still. You have to see what the resources are that are out there. It's not an easy, oh, this is information that seems to be very wildly
Mhm.
popular or known. You're still digging, I feel like, a bit too much.
Yeah, so you're having to dig through to find where you could possibly get that
Yeah.
financing. So it's not
Yeah. And
as
I think it's
easy.
it's not so, because again, especially if you're a first time business owner, you're more than likely not going to have great luck at the bank. This is what it comes down to,
Right.
right? Like it
Yeah.
really is going to be tough. So you have to find alternate uh, funding sources, and that's not something that a lot of people are familiar with, or they're scared of. They're
Yeah.
like, is it, we're so used to being like, oh, the bank is the go-to for these things. And if the bank says no, or you can't, you just don't have enough, it's like a double-edged sword. If you're starting your business, then how do you have the sales reports or the right?
Right.
But that's who to go to. So I think those conversations amongst business owners, those go a long way.
I agree. So it's great to hear from your experience what you've seen. Because again, if you're not bankable, then you do need to. It's almost like Corinne was saying, that technical assistance, which she referred to as the bail team. I love
Yes.
that, because you do need, a core group of individuals to just have the conversation to figure out,
Mhm.
where do I go
Yeah.
to
And
get some
and you have
funding.
to have an open mind. Have to have an open
Yeah.
mind, and you have to
Yeah.
be creative. So, you know, you have to make sure your bail team is aligns with you, because if your bail team is very, is used to a certain way and not thinking outside the box, maybe you need a new bail team.
Yeah, no, that's very insightful. I agree completely, because they may not really be there to support and help you grow.
Yeah.
And that's again your success, you know, 19 years is amazing. I think it's
Thank
great.
you.
It's really,
Thank you.
it's something to be very proud of, and congratulations on that. It's wonderful.
Thanks.
Now I'd like to introduce Ginger Siegel. Ginger is the North American Small Business Lead for MasterCard. She has spent her entire career in small business, from calling on doctors as a pharmaceutical rep to now leading small business at MasterCard. Ginger continues to keep focus on female entrepreneurship and as a frequent speaker in many national conferences. Ginger, thank you for joining us.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much. And it's really been such a pleasure working with Biz2 Credit. And I am really excited about the conversation today, especially the timing of this, celebrating women and also celebrating all the great work that Biz2 Credit does. So really excited about today.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in and talk about what we've seen in our annual women-owned business study. First, on the top 5 states, we can see that California and Florida are, are fairly close to each other, 0.3 difference. And it would be interesting to get your perspective on if this is a factor as women open or start their own business.
It's a really great question, and I'll throw a couple stats out. I love stats, but between 2018 and 2019, there were about 876,000 new small businesses that formed in the United States. In 2024, we believe that the number is going to be 6 million. So if you think about that tremendous growth of businesses overall, we are seeing a lot of this growth out west in some of the mountain states. So the numbers that you have here are super important, because what they're showing is that the growth of financing is happening more out west, which makes sense, because if you're seeing more businesses being formed in a certain location, that is where a lot of this financing is going to happen. And I also think that part of this is the growth in women-owned businesses overall. And as I mentioned to you before, the fastest growing segment of small businesses right now are female Hispanic businesses. So this all makes sense. Now, it's not to say that businesses aren't opening in New York, but because we're seeing a greater shift out west, you're going to see less financing applications probably where those states are, where they're not seeing as much growth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So, we as we look at New York as being that kind of in that 5th slot, what do you think is causing that discrepancy? You have, definitely highlighted the growth on the West Coast.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a couple things. I think that, particularly coming out of COVID, where we started to see the great resignation, where people said, you know what, I want to do my passion. I want to work for myself. I mean, our stats today show, Debbie, that 75% of Gen Zers want to start their own business or be creators. So I think because we're seeing a lot of new businesses forming, people are looking at things like the cost. If people are deciding that it's too expensive to live in a particular state, let's say like New York, they're going to move out west. And they're going to move in states where they feel that it is going to be less expensive to live personally. So that's why we're starting to see some of that shift. And if you see some of these other states, it's fitting what we see in terms of growth. So we know that Texas also is outpacing the New York and some of the eastern states in terms of business growth. So this really falls in line with what we're seeing. The results of your study are really what we're seeing as well.
Very helpful. Thank you. Moving on to our next chart, there's actually 2 charts. One is age of business, and then also is the credit score. And so we're seeing that women have, in the business, they're owning their business, they're kind of, that has increased by 10 months, right? And we've also seen their credit score increase by 10 points. And I think that the question I've got for you is, what is your takeaway? And then kind of followed up, what are you seeing from MasterCard's perspective?
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the reasons that at MasterCard we focus so much on, women businesses is because in the past they have been more underserved. And in fact, if you take a look at a stat just around venture capital, only 2% of venture capital goes to women today. And if you're a Black female business owner, that number is 0.002%. So what we're seeing is that women had to work harder to get capital. And once they did, though, their businesses were much more resilient. And it's interesting, I think the stat is for every dollar that you invest in a women-owned business, you get $3 back. So I think we're seeing that the success of these women-owned businesses is growing, as is all the things that come with that: increase in revenue and increase in years in business. So we tend to see that women run businesses are very resilient. Women tend to be very focused on keeping that business open at all costs. So I think there's some qualitative factors, and then there's also some quantitative factors as well.
Yeah, it's interesting when we were talking with Corinne. She mentioned that women are becoming, more sophisticated, more confident, and even some of the businesses they're opening are in the STEM, kind of those STEM fields. So it's also, again, I can imagine that's also having, some impact, right, from a credit score perspective and some of their opportunities as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, look, I think that inherently in the past, we know there's a number of underserved communities out there that MasterCard has worked with, and particularly with women. But what has been most interesting to me is that if you give women credit, their ability to really take it and run with it and be able to see not just the growth in their business, but they're also very good at managing finances. And so you tend to see that pop in terms of the credit scores. And I'm sure at Biz2 you've seen that because you all, are front and center in terms of lending. So look, it's not to say that male-owned businesses don't do well, but we are seeing that a lot of women who have to be more resilient because it's been harder for them. We also see that a lot of women, if you ask women why they started their business, it's not necessarily for profit, it's for passion. And I think anytime you do something for a passion, you're going to work super hard at it.
Yeah, I agree. They're just working harder to make sure that they are successful. They don't want to fail.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So we've got one last slide that we're going to go over. It's a table that really shows year over year differences between women and men. Women have outpaced men in revenue, expenses, and also the average funding size. And we also see, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before, that they're taking more financing, they're spending more time on their business, and they're having, a higher return than before. What factors do you think are driving those differences?
Well, I think especially coming out of COVID, there's been a kind of gathering of the ecosystem to help support women. So, for example, you saw the SBA that set up all these women centers specifically to help women-owned businesses, get up there. What we talked about before in terms of annual revenue and the differences that we see here, 15.2 versus 8. It's really speaking to what we talked about before, is the capability of women to take a dollar and turn it into more. So that's where you see some of the revenue growth. I think that, it makes sense that if your revenue is growing faster, your operating expenses are going to go up because you're going to need more things to help run the business. And then the other thing is, in terms of average age of the business, we know that they're more resilient, but we also know that it took them a lot longer to get started. So that's why you're going to see that they're probably less, time in business. And then I think because of the advent of a lot of focus, the focus that you have, the focus that many banks have, that's, I believe, why you see the funding size going up. Because again, if you're a business and you can present yourself as having more revenue growth, then you're going to actually see your ability to get more credit in terms of the size of the loan, go up as well. So I think all of these things factor in. Your data is spot on in terms of what we're seeing as well. But those, I think, are some of the key reasons that we're seeing a lot of these trends.
Great. This was so helpful. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on this webinar with us, and I think a lot of great takeaways.
No, thank you, Debbie. And look, I appreciate the partnership that MasterCard and Biz2Credit have. You're a wonderful spokesperson for the company, and really thrilled to be on today. And it's one of my favorite topics is to talk about small business. And then you add female in there. I love it.
I'm with you. Again, thank you to all of our attendees and our speakers today who took the time to review our annual Women-Owned Business Study. It's been a great experience hosting this webinar for another year, and thank you and see you next time.
Thank you to everyone for attending this webinar. You can locate the Women's Report from today's program on biztocredit.com/research-reports. You can also see the most recent BizToCredit Small Business Earnings Report, which was released earlier today on our website under the Knowledge Center tab. And give us a follow on social channels for the latest small business updates. Thank you once again for joining us. The session will now conclude. A recording of today's webcast will be made available in the BizToCredit Webcast Center following the conclusion of the session. Your session will now disconnect automatically. Thank you.